right. Well, we have a special guest today with us on the podcast that has not officially been named yet, but we are still floating around some different names.
Floating around some different names.
Sippin' Saints is one of the names.
I was like, what do you mean? His name is
like
Zach.
Nicknames on the podcast.
We have a special guest. We're still
I
figuring
thought
out
we were
names.
floating around Zach's name. I'm like, what is there to float?
We are floating around nicknames for Zach still, but no. So we have Zach here, myself, Abel, and Lauren. Episode 3, and today the conversation we're talking about is hurt from people and how to work through that. And obviously, everybody that goes through life gets hurt to one degree or another, and multiple times. And
Would argue if you're not living life if you haven't gotten hurt.
yeah, I mean, I just think it just naturally happens. You just get hurt.
Yeah.
You get close to people. Having relationships is part of the way that God's created us. You build relationships with people, and then you get hurt by things they say. You get hurt by things they do. They act in ways you never expected. And it's friends, it's family, it's coworkers, it's bosses. And so, this is a big thing in a lot of people when they get hurt. A lot of times they get stuck and they don't know how to move past that hurt. And so, we want to talk all things hurt today. And I thought we'd have this group kind of share their thoughts, experience that kind of help some other people. That's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to help other people kind of work through, think through, work through, any hurt that they've had in their life.
I'd be interested to hear where a story or experience where you guys were hurt by someone and how you dealt with it, or what that was like, or maybe how you didn't deal with it well, or what that looked like. I think that would
Jumping right in the deep end.
Yeah.
He said, take the
Put your
floaties off. He said, take the
Put your
floaties.
on. We're jumping in the deep end. Yeah.
Just one story.
I mean,
Maybe
you
we
could,
pick the
I gotta pick from the
relationship.
whole
we could
library.
do group, we
Yeah.
could do
Pull out
group
my
therapy
journal.
if we need to. But
Yeah.
no, yeah, I mean,
Go
I'd
ahead.
be interested
Who's
in-
got, Zach, you got a story you can think of? No names, of course.
Yeah, no names.
My brother.
My best friend.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many stories. I guess this is a great way to be introduced to the podcast. Here's
Yeah.
my deep hurt.
Yep.
Here's
Pretty much
how
how we
it
all
is.
started, don't
We're
worry.
gonna get real here. in this
That's all right.
podcast.
I'm okay with being vulnerable. So, okay, here's a story. This is actually a really significant one in
Okay.
my life. So I grew up, around like second grade, I started to form this group of friends with, there were 3 of us. This trio, we went to church together. One of them, he and I went to school together, but we did like everything together at each other's houses on the weekends. Like we started a band together. We would just do so much. And people started calling us the Tripod.
Wow.
Wow.
Because we came as one.
That's a nickname.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
That's great.
And
It's fire.
like so at church together, we would be on the worship team, and we just we helped each other grow. We challenged each other. We support each other, all these things. And that lasted all the way up through junior high, through high school. But once the year started getting along, and we got into senior year, and it was time to start deciding kind of what college to go to. Started to realize that our friendship hadn't been the same that it had been before. Like something shifted in our friendship, to where there's kind of like unspoken tension that sometimes would come to light in really like painful ways.
Around where you guys were going to go to college?
Even before that.
Oh, okay.
It started to come to light because as we started to think of like where we're going to college, I was thinking of coming to Chicago. I'm from Southern California. So this is a big move away from the tripod, right? How can a leg be separated?
Come on.
It
Wouldn't be a tripod.
Exactly. So the thing was like, where will my friendships be once I'm 2,000 miles away from home? Like, does this have the strength to last beyond through the distance? And so I started to realize, we've been growing distant for a long time. What's going on here? And the things that had happened is just like one friend like felt really hurt and unseen by the other 2 of us. we just like were not sensitive to the things he was going through. And so he started to pull away and stopped being vulnerable with us. Like, and we like didn't even realize that. And then the other friends, so two of us came from like a similar socioeconomic background, and the other one was kind of a little bit more like came from a better place, like wealthier than us. And so we kind of had some bitterness towards some of his life situation that we did not experience. And so we started to kind of even like treat him with some coldness. And so it was interesting because it was multi-layered, right? In one sense, there were two friends pulling back from this one friend, and then in another sense, there was two friends pulling back from another one. And it just created this interesting dynamic. And we started to realize it, especially the summer after our first year of college, and coming back from summer break, and we were in a band together, and we led worship at a summer camp, and we lived together. We played multiple like worship sets in a day plus practice, and the conflict that would erupt in that like kind of pressure cooker of a stressful experience, it showed us like, whoa, things are different. And what made the lasting mark to me is one of my friends was starting to talk about like his relationship, and like things are getting serious, and yeah, I might propose to her soon. And one of our other friends, like who wasn't in the tripod, one of our other friends asked him like, oh, like who's gonna stand up, like who's gonna be your best man? And we had always assumed, oh, it'll be us. But he said this other guy, like this other friend. And for me, that was just like a wake up call, realizing like, oh, our friendship has fallen. Not because like I wanted to stand up and be like, oh, look at how like cool I am and how special I am that I get to stand up. But like, it showed that the intimacy had become so shattered. And there was a lot of hurt and pain that happened. I don't know if we want to get into the like how that was resolved yet, but like I can if you want. But that caused a lot of pain because it was deep friendships, close people that I loved, that I had shared my life with, and like my difficulties, my struggles, and that like subtle shift that started to happen that you don't notice until like big things start to erupt. And I held that a lot of pain because of that. Now that's not necessarily like this person betrayed me or this like big thing. Yeah. But it's that drifting away. Yeah. Of like, man, we don't talk anymore. Man, like you're not there for me anymore. Oh man, I'm not there for you. Like when's the last time I asked you how you really were? And that was a really painful time. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah.
So, Zach, and you speak to this as well, but open it up to all of you guys. So all of us have gone through different experiences of hurt, like Zach, and he used the word holding on, like when you hold on to this hurt. So for someone that may be holding on to hurt, how can they let go of hurt, of pain that was caused by someone that they trusted? Like, how do you work through that? Someone that's saying, whether it's a fresh hurt or it's a hurt from a long time ago, how do you let go and move on? How do you heal?
I feel like in friendship, there's two types of hurt. One is similar to that, where you just drift apart and there's not any communication, and it hurts to feel that distance, but then you just kind of like, because it's like walking on eggshells or tiptoeing around. Something's changed, but we're not talking about it. And then there's that hurt where someone blows up, or you have a really hard conversation and it's like blunt and direct, and like there's words involved that like cut really deep. So I feel like it's not a matter of in my mind, when you say, how do you let go of holding on to that pain? I feel like that to me translates just forget about it or don't address it. And so holding on or letting go of that pain, I think, is more about like, how do I deal with this so that I can let go and not like carry this and drag it with me my whole life, Yeah. So
and maybe that's the better language. How do you work through hurt, or how
so
do
that you can?
Yeah. How do you heal from hurt? Because if you've been hurt, especially by something, if it's fresh, you like mull it over in your mind over and
And the
over and
closer the
over.
person,
Yeah,
the
you're
more
just
it
like
turns.
how they did that, and I can't believe. And the more information that sometimes comes out continues to like reopen the wound. So how do you work through that? Maybe that is the better way to say it.
I had a friend in high school. We were like super close. We did everything together. Like probably unhealthily close a little bit. You know, you're learning how to not have
codependency.
a little codependency there. We learned our lesson. But we were really close. We shared everything. We were together all the time. Like we laughed, we cried, like, you know, really good friendship, despite the codependency part. And one day, literally, she just like dropped off the face of the earth, like stopped talking to me, like completely. And I never saw her again. I literally thought, did my friend die? And I was like, as I was thinking like over and over in my head, like, did I do something? Was it me? Like, is she actually alive? And that constant turning and turning and turning. And to this day, I haven't resolved it because I never heard from her again. And so that kind of left a deep wound of abandonment. Like, I let this person in and really close, and then they just chose to leave and didn't even like communicate why. So I think in that scenario where the other person is who knows where, and you can't necessarily find that peace or that healing, it had to be more like, okay, Lauren, that's not going to happen all the time. And there might have been a reason, but you can't keep like living in fear of that happening again, like not letting other people in out of that fear of like friends leaving again. So I think in that situation it's probably a little bit different. But if both parties are up for it, like, I think it's resolvable.
Yeah, I was thinking about what you were saying, Lauren. Like, you don't want to be afraid of not letting anyone else in because someone hurt you. Like, I think you could easily get into that mindset that I'm not going to let anybody in now, or I'm not going to let that person back in because, you know, we're hurt. I was just thinking about, like, okay, I'm like, from a follower of Jesus' perspective, right? Like, let me look at Jesus' example, right? You had Judas and Peter, right? Which I'm sure, right, he experienced very significant hurt by both of those scenarios, right? And we never read of him interacting with Judas again, but we do read of Jesus interacting with Peter again, and that he came and literally made him breakfast and sat down with him, right? And I know, like, I don't want to just be the person that says, well, just look to Jesus, but, you know, at the same time, like, you know, there is a lot there, that there are a lot of principles and attitudes there from Jesus himself that we can learn from. And, you know, I think being able to admit that, one, this is going to be hard, and it's not going to be an easy path back to reconciliation, but it's possible. It is possible. If Jesus himself, who walked alongside Peter for 3 years, 4 years, did life with him, like, I mean, experienced some of the most intimate moments of his ministry with Peter, can then, you know, come back and have breakfast with him after he denied him, right? After he denied him 3 times. Like, if that isn't the ultimate form of betrayal, and then being able to come back and have breakfast with Peter, right? Like, that should be our example, right? And to me, that's what I try to go back to. Like, and even right now, like, right now I think I'm in a season of being hurt from a friend. I had a friend in high school. Her and I were really good friends, and we kind of fell off. And then just like a year or two ago, I was hearing that she was saying things about me that weren't true. That just like were blatantly not true. And it was really frustrating because I was like, where did that come from? I'm like, what? I'm like, if anything, like, I feel like I gave you too much of myself in our friendship, right? Like, I was too, like, I don't know if this is possible, but I was almost too like, I put myself second, but in an unhealthy way, right? So I'm like, I'm like thinking back, I'm like, what could I have possibly done in our 4 or 5 year friendship that would have caused you to say these things? And so I think even right now, I'm in like even though I'm talking about Jesus coming back to Peter, having breakfast with him, I'm like, I don't know that I would want to have breakfast with this person, right? And so I'm in this season right now of like kind of working through that, and like I don't think I need to reach out to her or anything like that, but I feel like for me there is a level of forgiveness in my own heart, because they might not be thinking about it at all, but it's causing me to not lose sleep, but it's causing me to overthink stuff or really like mull over it when I don't really be needing to. I don't really need to. I could forgive her and move on. But like honestly, a part of me is like, man, it's just like I don't like it. It's hard. I don't know. Like that's the only way I can put it. And it's hard to do that right now.
It's good.
Yeah,
It's good. Zach, any thoughts on working through hurt? How to get past it? How to get through it? How to heal from it?
Yeah, I think it starts with your own heart, kind of like you have been saying, because there's kind of two aspects to it. How do I heal from the hurt, and then how does this relationship heal from the hurt? And those can be two different steps, because while you may heal from the hurt, the relationship may never heal, depending on the willingness for reconciliation of the other person. And I have multiple examples in my own life where relationships have been reconciled and relationships haven't. But I think part of it is definitely like realizing as long as you are holding tight to pain, as long as you're holding tight to that hurt, it's going to like leave deeper wounds in yourself. You know, the tighter you clutch, the further it sinks in and cuts in. And so you have to be willing. You have to come to a place where you're willing to start to open up your hands and to well, you said let it go, or you said there's maybe almost a deception with the language of letting it go, because it almost feels like a passive, like, hey, it's not my problem anymore. But it's actually a very involved process.
Yeah,
like
it is.
Like sometimes letting go can even cause more pain. But once you are completely let go, that frees you up to heal, because that thing causing that damage isn't there. Anyways, overwrought analogy.
No,
But
that's really good.
there's this quote by C.S. Lewis in his book, The Four Loves, and it's about vulnerability and love. And it says this. He says, "To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It won't be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, and irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable." Like this, often our reaction to, and what we think is healing, is closing in on ourselves, putting up these walls and this armor so that we don't get hurt again. But that all actually keeps us from being able to love again, because love inherently is a vulnerable process. You cannot love if you're not giving of yourself. And so I think it's difficult, but there needs to be this realization that healing can happen if I open up, and it doesn't necessarily have to be if I open up, I will get hurt again. And even a sense there will be pain that comes with love, and that's just part of it. I'm married. My wife breaks my heart sometimes, not because she's a bad person, but because that's what it means to love. You disappoint the people close to you. So just that willingness of being able to realize the tighter I hold to this, the deeper the wounds will sink in. And the harder it will be to find healing. But the sooner that you are able to address that wound, the more you're able to heal that wound. And that's kind of an abstract thing that I'm saying. But
I think that comes alive like in the story of Peter and Jesus. Like Jesus was willing to come back. Like it would have been very different if Jesus had come back and showed up to the disciples and never once interacted with Peter and just brushed over him, right? But it's like, I don't know, just that picture of him making him breakfast, right, and sitting down with him and being like, I'm opening myself up to you again, even though you just denied me a couple days ago, right? And it's exactly what you're saying, right? Like if Jesus didn't have this heart that was willing and ready to give it up for people, right, and for Peter specifically in this scenario, then he would have been closed off, right? And I just think that's like we can easily take that, or not easily maybe, but we could take that and we can apply that into our own life. Like so many times it's hard to get over things because we just keep holding on to them, and they keep sinking, and we're wondering like, why are we still hurt about this? Why are we still like dealing with this? Why it's been 3 years since that happened. Why am I still angry about this? It's because you're probably still holding on to it, and it's just cutting deeper and deeper. So what does that look like, to let go and to really just allow, forgiveness and true forgiveness from your own heart to that person, right? Even if you don't feel like they deserve it, what does it look like to embrace it, to practice it, to really come to a place where you are letting go of that pain and that hurt?
Yeah. A couple of the things that have helped for me, I think number one is acknowledging that you're hurt and realizing that you've been hurt. Sometimes you don't realize it, and you're in a funk and you don't fully realize that you're actually hurt, and you didn't know it.
Yeah.
It's like, that's interesting. I think number two is, I kind of shared my freshman year was really difficult, and I was in this depression last time, so we won't make this super sad again. But I got out of that when I went to speak in Ecuador, and I was with my dad, and my dad had this vision when we were flying into Ecuador that there was people with like this that had hurt that they were hiding. And I'm like, oh, that's really good. Like, that's gonna really, like, that's powerful that God gave that to you. I'm like, that's,
You're like, wow.
get him, Jesus, And I remember this big, long rectangle room, and I'm supposed to speak day 2. My dad's speaking day 1. I'm still going through depression. I don't know if he even really knew about it or not. I don't think he did. And I'm sitting as far back in the room, all these high school students in the room. And I don't remember all the message was on, but God was speaking through my dad on a hurt. And I just felt the Lord just directly just was communicating to me about hurt that I was hiding and dealing with. And I was just like really crying in the background. Like, I don't know if I've ever like cried in a sermon before like that. I'm way back in the end of the room. Everybody leaves, and I went up to the stage and got on my knees and just said, Lord, here's what I felt like God was telling me. I felt like God was telling me to give up, release, let go of pain and hurt that I was holding on to, that I couldn't carry any longer. And a lot of these situations where I was hurt, it was like a combination of them. They weren't intentional decisions or things that people did that hurt me. Like, I'm going to hurt Josiah, but they were things that people did that hurt me. Right. And some of them probably still don't know. And so I went to the altar and I just prayed and I said, God, I give you. And I went through specifically, I named what the different hurts were. And I'm like, I can't carry this anymore. I need you to carry it. And honestly, I don't know if it was immediate or it was in 2 days. I don't remember exactly, but that was the breaking of the depression. And it was this changing of mindset of, I don't have to just carry all the pain, that I can actually give it over to my Father. I can actually give it over to Christ, and he can help carry it. He doesn't just want my good, but he wants the bad. I think the third thing, so giving it to God, I think the third thing is talking through it with people that you trust, or counselors or therapists. I think it's really, sometimes it's so jumbled up and messed up within you that you really need to, and that maybe that's 2 or 3. I don't know. It's not like a perfect linear order of these are just steps, but I do think talking it through with a friend, a parent, somebody that you trust and that can really help you. It's not always the advice that they give you either. It's just the fact that you're talking through it with somebody. And sometimes there's things exposed in those conversations that you didn't even realize that just come out as you're processing it with somebody else. And then I think the fourth thing that can help people work through hurt is, if you can, and talk through it with the person that hurt you, and in the right setting at the right time, talk through and address it with that person and say, here's how you hurt me. They may be aware, they may be unaware, they may have hurt too, but trying to get at peace with that person. I think those are all different ways that can help you heal or work through hurt. But I want to circle back with that idea, because Zach said something that was really interesting. He talked about just this idea of being vulnerable. And I've had quite a few conversations with people that once they've been hurt, they have trouble being vulnerable again.
Yeah.
And so, speak to this question. How can someone avoid carrying the emotional baggage from past hurts into future relationships?
It's a great question.
Like, you've been hurt, you had that close friend, you have that person, they abandon you, leave you. And I've talked with so many people that say, like, or maybe they believe now, maybe it's more of a belief thing. If this person who was close to me can abandon me, then I know other people can do too.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to guard myself from being hurt by keeping people at a certain distance away.
Yeah, I would say maybe start by taking baby steps and letting people in. Like, you don't have to fully let someone in all the way. You can almost like someone who is, maybe scared of jumping off a 50-foot cliff into a lake, but you start off at the 10-foot cliff and you work your way up to the 20-foot cliff, right? And you just start, like, I think those little wins and goal setting might help somebody build that trust up to let people in, right? Just even for yourself, like, not even just with a specific person, but with you, like, just letting people in. Maybe start with, a close sibling or a family member that you can let in a little bit more than you have already. And just start by, like, just almost working that muscle of trust and working that muscle of vulnerability, because I don't think it's healthy or possible, maybe possible, but I feel like you don't need to go from 0 to 100 on the vulnerability scale if you've been hurt and you have that baggage. But maybe just start by practicing it a little bit, right? Little by little, and taking those baby steps where you then get to a place where you feel like you are comfortable. But you do need to work through that previous, weights, baggage that you're carrying. And it might mean going to a professional therapist, counselor to work it through, right? It might mean not just keeping it to yourself, but opening up and letting someone in. And I know it almost seems counterintuitive because you're like, well, I'm scared of doing that. But it's almost like, well, I know you're scared of it, but it's kind of the remedy to get into back to where you want to be at.
What do you think, Lauren? How can you avoid carrying the baggage from past hurts into the new relationships of the future?
I don't think that you can avoid it. I think, because I've seen this pattern in my life, and I'd say there is always that fear in the back of my mind that if I let people in close, that they will leave and not tell me why. So I never grow. I never know the reason. So to say that I have relationships, and even really close relationships right now, where that fear doesn't, like, replay in my mind would be a lie. I think that if I don't choose to love people, I die. Like, if I don't choose to continue letting people in, and I say this with, like, I'm currently right now in a place where we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast, but, like, with vulnerability comes, like, wisdom. You can't be vulnerable with everyone. You can't, let people into this really close place in your heart and in your mind and the things that you're processing. But if you don't try to do that with some people, you will eventually die or numb out. Or, like, us as humans, and this kind of goes along with what Zach was saying, are created to love and be loved. And part of being loved is being fully known. But if you don't let people know you, then you can't be fully loved and encounter, like, really true companionship and relationship. And that goes across the board for, like, friendship, dating, married, like, any type of relationship. If you don't let people know you, you can't be fully loved. And so right now I'm in this place where I'm learning boundaries and being okay to take it step by step, but also not letting fear dictate what I share and don't share. It's wisdom, like trying to learn God's way for relationships and not, like, base it out of this past hurt or pain or fear that I feel around relationships. And I have some really close friends right now who have told me when I've hurt them, And I love, as hard as it is, I value that so much
Yeah.
because it's the opposite of what I'm afraid of. It's
Yeah.
like
Good.
proving that people do love me and there's like, I have value that I can bring to the relationship.
It's almost that idea of they're willing to fight for the relationship.
Yeah.
Right. And if you walk through hard conflict or pain and you can resolve that hurt, that relationship goes way deeper. Like it becomes
Yeah,
this like
that's-
family
Yeah.
feeling, which I mean, some people's families aren't like that, but that really close, like intimate life on life, you know? So it's a journey, I think. What was the original question?
Yeah, just kind of, moving past the
Yeah.
the baggage, if you want to use that word, or the hurt, and not bringing that into the new relationship.
It's just learning a new way. Simply put, like I think it's just learning a new way to live or respond, if that makes sense. If I'm operating in this fear, I'm gonna like operate in that if I continue believing those things. But if I choose to take a risk, I have to learn a new way to do relationship, communicate better, have better boundaries, or love actively, and don't just say I love someone, but like physically show them, here, I bought you this gift, or I wrote you this card because I'm trying to find a new way to do, life and not carry that baggage with me into new relationships.
It's good.
I thought of a picture when you mentioned the baggage question again. Excuse me. I thought of someone who's going on a trip, right? Going on vacation. They're bringing their luggage with them, right? And when they get to their place, let's say they go to I don't know, Italy, right? Get some pasta. I want to get some authentic homemade pasta in Italy, right?
Are you hungry? Or?
Come on.
Yeah, we're really nailing down the pasta
I'm
part.
hungry.
Yeah.
But so they go to Italy, right? They go with their baggage. They get a postcard, or let's say it's a fridge magnet that they can put on their fridge when they get back, right? So they come back from the trip, and or let's say it's a pin, right, that they can put on their backpack, right? And it's their traveling backpack. I think when you're jumping into a new relationship, it's kind of like that. You don't want to bring baggage with you, but you are going to bring those pins with you, right? And you are going to bring those experiences with you. Like, yo, I did go through this, and this is a part of my story, and this did happen to me, right? And I need you to know this, because it's not that if you can get to a place where it's no longer baggage, but now it's a pin, and it's not as heavy, but it also is a symbol of where you've been and what you've experienced, and you get to that place, I think that's really healthy.
Yeah, and sometimes it's more like one of those T-shirts that says
Yeah.
like "I survived Y2K" or something. It's like I survived it. Like this is some like sightseeing tour. No, this was
Right.
an event that I like came through.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I was gonna say something similar. Is like
Hmm.
you have to, because I like what Lauren said. You will carry it in. Like you can't just like.
Right.
You've gone through it.
Yeah.
There's no erasing that. So being self-aware is very important, and communicating those points. Because like what happens is when someone steps on a trigger, what often happens is you just start to spiral, or you start to go into crisis mode, or you start to close off yourself or whatever it is. So if you know yourself well, if you're self-aware, if you've processed through these things, then you're able to think, no, this is like a trauma response that I'm going through right now, or the reason I'm reacting this way is because I'm afraid they're gonna leave me like my dad did, or whatever that might be. And so being aware of that allows you then also to take a second and ask, is this an appropriate, like, what is this emotion telling me about myself? And then what is the proper response? What is the healthy response to that, trigger or something?
And I really like what you said, Abel, like communicating what that pain was.
Yeah.
So when you walk into a relationship, it's not like this person is stepping on, triggering you all the time. It's like you have to communicate, actually, this is like a little pain that I have.
Yeah.
Like this is a trigger for me.
Yeah.
And so that way they know, not that you expect them to, but it's helpful for if I'm a friend and you're walking through that, like you communicate, hey, I have abandonment issues and here's the triggers. I now know how to love you better in that place, and so that I don't keep doing that.
Yeah.
Then the flip side, you have people who you have communicated to and you have told, hey, these are the trigger points. These are my areas of pain, and they just keep pressing the button. And you're just like, at some point, I think it's wise to take a step back and say, if you can't take care of my heart as a friend, I think that we'll be acquaintances.
Yeah.
Like not
Boundaries.
closer friends. Yeah.
Boundaries, yeah.
You know,
That's good.
what you guys were saying, it made me think of when me and my wife were dating first few months. We're in our dating relationship. We went out to breakfast. I took a day off. We went out to Oak Brook, got breakfast.
Nice.
And I think we were around 3-4 months. And I had a conversation with my dad like the day or two before. And in that conversation, my dad was saying, I think you're moving emotionally too quick. Like you guys are spending a lot of time together. You're talking all the time. And it doesn't mean that she's not the right one, but I just think you're moving really emotionally quick. And I agreed with him. I was like, yeah, like we were at that point going on way too many dates a week and stuff. And I was just head over heels. So we go out to breakfast and I tell my wife, my girlfriend at the time, I tell her, hey, I think that kind of like, I think we need to pull the communication back a little bit. And, I'm still in it and everything, but I just think we need to, oh man, I had no
man,
clue.
as a girl, that's a big like.
I had no clue. And I think, seriously, I think it was like, hey, like instead of going out, 3 times a week or 2 times, like let's take it down 1, and instead of talking every night, so I just try to pull it back. Like, I'm just thinking I'm pulling this back. Okay, here's what I really didn't know though. I did not know that she had past hurt in that area. And specifically like really serious situation that happened where I won't go into it, but she was in a really good relationship and the person left, the person abandoned the relationship and it was very serious. And so we leave the breakfast place and we start walking around the mall and she's like flipped. She's like in a totally different headspace. She's in a totally different mood, totally different mindset. And I'm like, I've never seen this side of her. I'm like, what is going on? Like, she's just a little moody. She's like, doesn't really want to be there. Short, when someone's acting different.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if we talked about it there the next day, but when I was communicating, hey, I'm so invested in this, I'm so with this, but I just want to slow it down, the pace of communication so that we can be healthy and it could be good long term.
Yeah.
She heard he's out.
Yeah.
He's abandoning. So I was stepping on a landmine that I had no clue. So it's not, so I say that to say, there are because we talked about how can we not bring baggage into future relationships, but sometimes people that we have relationships with or start relationships with, we're totally unaware of the landmines they have, the past hurt, the baggage that they have. Yeah. And I had no intention at all to end the relationship. Like I was like, let's keep going.
Yeah.
But what I communicated triggered a hurt that then allowed her to go way back to a place of hurt that she was still working through and still healing from.
Yeah. That happened to me too. I was in Carolina shoes though. So before my girlfriend and I started dating, we this was probably back in late April. We were at a restaurant eating pasta.
There's a theme going on there. There's a theme. There's a theme.
I like pasta. But so we were at a restaurant, and so she's gonna do her internship this summer. She's doing her internship right now. So when she first brought it up, she was like, "Yeah, we're talking about internship stuff." She's like, "I'm thinking about doing this." She's like, "I'm thinking about going to Michigan for 8 weeks." And I was like, and for me, like that in the past with a previous relationship was a point of tension. And so all I heard was, I'm ending the friendship. I'm going to Michigan. And if you're still available when I'm back from my internship, then we can continue this friendship. Which she hadn't said that or communicated that at all. She was just saying, yeah, I'm thinking about going but my mind went, whoom, like it just,
it's over.
Yeah, just, I mean,
she's
it's
done.
Spiraled.
Yeah.
And she could tell, like, I was like short and I was just like quiet. And we ended up talking about it before we left because I was like, I cannot leave this restaurant without talking about this. And so I was like, so does this, like, what does this mean for us? She was like, what are you talking? Like, what do you mean this? What does this mean for us? I was like, are we still good? She was like, yeah, why wouldn't we be still good? And I'm like, well, because here's where I went. And then she was like, oh, she was like, wow, like, that's not what I meant at all. I was just expressing that I might be in Michigan for 8 weeks this summer, which she is. But like, that doesn't mean the dynamic of our relationship or trajectory of our relationship is going to change. I was like, oh.
And in those situations, sometimes, and actually we were in premarital with your parents and your mom said something, because we were talking through some fight or some situation that we had gone through, planning on getting married. And your mom said something to me like this. She said, when she said, you have to be really careful with your words, and you have to realize the power of your words as well. That even if, she said, I know, Josiah, you're not thinking about abandoning this relationship, but when you get into a fight, that's where her mind defaults to. And so you actually need to speak into her, even if you're not feeling that. Like, because I'm like, I don't feel, and it's almost like you're paying for the sins of somebody else. Like there's some other person that hurt this person.
Yeah.
And so I don't feel like I have to do it anymore, but I had to really make sure at that point in our relationship,
Yeah.
especially before we were married, it started to like really flare things up,
Yeah.
that I really needed to speak into that area of hurt that she was still healing from.
Yeah.
And if we went through a fight or a disagreement, that I would say, hey, and I just want you to know, I have no intention of leaving.
Yeah.
Like I know there was I'm here, I'm still with you, I'm committed, I'm going to the end.
Yeah.
And I had to speak out of something that I wasn't feeling. I had to speak to what she was feeling. And it was really your mom that helped me become aware of, oh, wow, I have to speak that truth into the situation, even though that's not how I'm thinking or that's how I'm feeling, because that's how she's feeling. And I need to speak that truth to reaffirm her. I'm not leaving. I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to leave like other people have.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what a beautiful thing to step into a place with someone and to help them to rewrite the story that they have been narrating
Yeah.
for themselves.
Yeah.
You know, this like
So true.
this story of hurt and pain, these scripts that we have in our heads where we just like are constantly assuming these things or talking ourselves down, to like step into that place of brokenness with someone,
Yeah.
to sit with them there and say, let's pick up the pieces together.
Yeah.
Like, this is different.
Yeah.
It's such a
Powerful.
gospel thing. Like,
Yeah.
It is.
What else has Jesus done but stepped into our place of brokenness to sit with us there and to pick up the pieces and make it new?
Yeah.
And like, we have the opportunity to do that in our day-to-day relationships, our friendships, our marriges, our dating
Family
relationships, our
relationships.
cousins
Coworkers,
and our uncles and our,
employees, neighbors,
you know, like,
yeah.
what if we were just like people who brought beauty to places where there's brokenness, while also being broken ourselves? You know, it's like, that's just a beautiful thing to be able to sit with someone and to walk that journey of healing together, knowing that there will be times when you actually cause pain and cause damage, but then are able to say, would you please forgive me for this? Like,
And it's honestly frustrating. It could be frustrating in that moment because, like I said, I mean, just being honest, it felt like I was like, man, I'm having to clean up after somebody else's mistake, or I'm having to pay for the sins of somebody else. Like I never did anything that made her not trust me, but somebody else did. But I had to really change my perspective, like you were saying, and step into that narrative and start speaking truth into that lie that would come up in those challenging moments.
Yep.
Let me ask you guys this. How do you set healthy boundaries to protect yourself, or how can somebody do it to protect themselves from being hurt again in the future? Because you can work through the hurt, and it doesn't mean your relationship has to go right back to the same type of, relationship status or friendship that it was before. But if some people, even after you work through the hurt, they're going to hurt you again and hurt you again and hurt you again.
Yeah.
And they may not be it may be like you were saying earlier, Lauren, like you do need to create some boundaries. So what are some of those boundaries you can create if someone's going to repeatedly keep hurting you?
yeah, I
Like
just wanna-
toxic.
I want to say at the front end, if it is a toxic situation, sometimes the answer is to leave the toxic atmosphere, toxic environment. I'll tell this briefly because this story could take like so long because it's a significant part of my life. But my wife and I, we had mentors at a church we used to go to. And we spent we would have lunch with them after church every Sunday. We would serve with them at church and all these things. As time went on, things started to take this really toxic turn into kind of like this spiritually abusive situation. And spiritual abuse is when someone uses some kind of spiritual authority. Maybe they're a leader in the church. Maybe they've been a Christian longer. They use like this spiritual language and religious kind of authority to hurt you, to harm you, and and sometimes it sounds right because they're using scripture, or they sound really godly, but it's actually manipulative and harmful. Anyways, that could take many different forms. But we started to realize, this person is trying to shape us into their image, and not taking no for an answer. Like if we're not allowed to be ourselves, because then there's this harsh reaction. It grew to the point where, you know, I was a worship leader at the church. This person was a leader in the church, and he started to use his influence to say Zach should not be leading worship because of this, this, and this, all things that were like inaccurate and untrue. Verified, like not just because I felt that way. Like I would talk about this stuff with our community, and they would say, no, that's a lie. Like don't believe what that person is saying. Anyways, what ended up happening is my wife and I, we were engaged at the time, and they also opposed our marriage too, like hardcore. Even though everyone else is like, yeah, this is a great thing. Even her parents was like, yeah, go for it. And it's like, just this one guy. Anyways, you could tell I'm still processing through some of it.
Yeah.
What happened was we're like, we value this relationship and we want reconciliation to happen. And so we started to try to pursue that. And even to say sorry for some of the things that we had maybe done wrong in the relationship. But it grew to the point where he and his wife were just obstinately refusing to reconcile and saying like, no, we know what was right. They even said, we have heard from God in this matter and we will not change our position.
Wowzers.
And it got to the point where just like so unhealthy, so toxic. I was losing my ability to serve in church. Victory was having anxiety attacks on the way to church in the morning. And it was just like, because we knew we'd see them. And it was just this terrible experience. And we finally realized it actually took Victory talking to one of her mentors, explaining the situation, being vulnerable, right, with his hurt. And then being able to say, that is a situation of abuse. You need to leave. And we had like talked about it before, but we were like, no, when relationships go wrong as Christians, we have to bring about healing, right? We have to stay and bring about reconciliation. That's what we're called to do. But he finally was able to just say clearly and to name it like this, you are doing everything you can. And it's come to the point where it's not in your hands anymore. They are choosing this. And it's having a real effect on your health and well-being. You need to leave. And it was one of the hardest things we've ever had to do, to leave a church. We even had reached out to the pastor and there was no like help there. And so it came to the point where it's like, no, you need to step away before you crash and burn. And so I just want to kind of start the boundary conversation that like when you realize it, when you've done everything on your end to bring about healing and reconciliation, and you just come up against a wall over and over again, and not only just a wall that doesn't move, but a wall that starts to fight back and to hurt you even more. You need to like remove yourself from that situation. And I want to say that because sometimes we are in situations, and I'm sure we have a lot of people who are listening who are in or have been in situations of abuse, and it's the hardest thing to think about leaving or to think about change or to think, oh, things could be different. We get stuck in those places. And but sometimes it takes someone else just naming it. This is abuse, you need to leave. And then you realize, oh, it's true. But that's like kind of an extreme situation of like this harsh, toxic abuse. But it's something where we communicated how we were feeling, communicated these things that we wanted reconciliation, and they continued to harm and to hurt. And we stayed a little bit longer, maybe longer than we should have, honestly. But we tried so hard, prayed so hard. And finally, we just realized you need to step away. You need to leave that place and find healing. And that's where we came to New Life, actually. And that's a whole story. But we found healing in community. And there were times when people at New Life would say things unprompted, not even really knowing us very well. But they would say things so directly contradictory to the things that our toxic mentors would have told us. Like, and it was just so direct. And in that season of hurt, that we just knew it was the Holy Spirit speaking through our community. But anyways, it was a beautiful thing. Part of why we're still here is we found a family here that doesn't abuse but loves and cares.
And so
sometimes boundaries are just like you need to like. Sometimes there are
favorite.
extreme boundaries, right? That's an extreme example.
But would you say the first boundary there was you created distance? Like you said,
Yes.
hey, we're going to create distance because us being close with this other couple is just not healthy.
Yeah, and that distance wasn't like extreme in the like. Our first response was not let's leave. Our first response was like maybe let's put a little bit of distance. We see something's happening here. Maybe some distance will help us to reconcile this relationship. We need some time to like process this. And then when that continued not to help, it was like okay, more distance is needed. And then eventually like okay, we need to just cut things off.
Yeah,
And-
because on the flip side of it, with like cancel culture and stuff, there almost isn't that opportunity for reconciliation at all. Like it's just you hurt me, you did me wrong, you're out of my life
Yeah.
immediately. And you know, that's like the opposite side of the coin, right? Like that's another extreme, but it's something that I think is very prevalent right now, right? Especially in the younger generation. Like you've wronged me, and you've wronged me once, right? Like it's like a one-time chance. You do me wrong one time, and you can no longer ever speak into my life, and we will never ever build a relationship again or a friendship again. And that's not what we're going for either, right? Like I love that you guys took a step in creating a boundary to hope for a reconciliation in the relationship. It wasn't a step of boundary to cut off the relationship. It was a step of boundary to heal the relationship.
Yeah.
And I think if we can come at it with that perspective, especially as being followers of Jesus, like our boundaries should be, maybe should's a strong word, but I feel like our boundaries can be opportunities for reconciliation in the relationship,
Yeah.
not necessarily to cut off the relationship. It's not really a boundary, but kind of just processing.
it's a thought.
Yeah.
What Zach was talking about.
Yeah, boundaries are actually an act of love
Yeah.
for someone
Right,
in a relationship,
exactly.
even if it's like less of a toxic thing. Let's say
Yeah.
it's a friend who just has like, continue, like maybe they're piling their pain on you and never
Yeah.
hearing yours, like hearing from you,
Right.
and you are just so overwhelmed and you can't, take another step. And a boundary there, a way to love that person is saying, could you just ask me how I'm doing?
Yeah.
You know,
communicate.
and just like make sure that this relationship is a two-way
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yes, there are times when someone is hurting more than the other, and there are
Mm-hmm.
times for that. But if it's always just one direction, and you're just feeling the weight pile and pile and pile, then it's actually an act of love for yourself, but also for that person to say, "Hey, we need to put up some boundaries. I am also going through things, and this friendship will only be healthy if like you are also hearing from me, and like I'm able to share my burdens with you." Like that friendship is unhealthy as long as those boundaries aren't in place. So
Yeah.
putting a boundary in place is actually loving that person
Yeah.
well. And I'm sure there are probably even better examples of a loving boundary than that. But
I have a friend that I just actually set a boundary with. I was thinking about it. There's hot topics in any relationship. Family members. I have family members that are extreme opposites of one another on political or whatever it is. And so I have this close friend who's just really got a really strong opinion about something specifically in Christianity, like the different kind of branches under Christianity. But when he talked about it, when we had this conversation recently, I said, "Hey, let's talk through it together. I'd love to be able to learn together. Let's." But as we talked through it, his default was rude and demeaning, and he's never like ever that way with me. But the way he sometimes gets, he's kind of argumentative, kind of like a debater. And so when he gets there, though, he gets kind of cutthroat.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about it. We closed the conversation, and I texted him. I said, "Hey, listen, I value this relationship too much for it to be thrown away over a disagreement about something really small, in my opinion." And so I said, "I don't know if you knew this, but you were rude and demeaning in that conversation. And so I just want to draw a line. Here's my boundary. We're not going to talk about this thing anymore because it's not worth our relationship being
building
fractured,"
it,
is the word I used. And he actually called later, and I want to apologize. I'm really sorry, blah, blah, blah. And so that was a good response. But I still have drawn a boundary. We're just not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like, if you were able to talk about this in the right way, we talk about it.
Right.
But if it's going to be a demeaning, I'm just not going to subject myself to being demeaned or rude in a rude setting just because it's not what I'm looking for. It's not what I want. And it doesn't mean I can't talk about hard things, but you have to be able to draw those lines with people to say, actually, to preserve and protect this relationship, we just won't go there.
Yeah.
Boundary.
So it sounds like in no particular order. I don't think at least I can't rank them, but like space, communicate, like actually communicating to the other person that you're in that friendship relationship with, and then I think for me, one of the boundaries is having the mindset that I'm even like just going back to just for me, this is core, like having the mindset that I'm putting up a boundary or communicating or what, creating space for the purpose of reconciling the friendship, or for protecting the friendship, or for not allowing it to fracture. Like having that mindset and not having the mindset of, I'm just doing this because I'm trying to cut you off slowly and in a way that's comfortable for me. So that to me, I think is one of the boundaries, right? Like distance, communication, but also the mindset of reconciliation and not of cancel culture.
Yeah. And consistency and faithfulness with those boundaries. It's really easy because sometimes it feels wrong to say someone,
Yeah.
like in the situation I was giving, like, hey, stop telling me your hurts. You know, that sounds like really mean, but it makes sense in the context. Was like, I can love you better if you also hear from me, like, you know. But that feels wrong to say, and so if you set up that boundary, then it's hard to enforce, like, once you've made it, or it's hard to stay consistent. So you have to, like, once you set a boundary, you've got to be consistent with that boundary. Even when it feels when it feels like you're being unfair or something. I mean, obviously, if your boundary is unfair, you know, you got to think about that. But
I have two mentors that are kind of walking with this whole area of boundaries with me, and he said boundaries are principles that you live by, pretty much, like in a nutshell. And I was like, oh yeah, that's true. Like things that I value, and if my intention is to love someone, having them dump their whole life on me every 5 minutes is not actually loving them. It's not helping them. It's not doing what my desire is. It's not serving them, and it's not serving me. So, like, what is the better option here? And it would be to, hey, what about a therapist? Or communicating, hey, there's times for everything, and now's not the time to talk about your trauma.
Right.
So just learning that, like, what are principles that you want to live by, and then I think that will clearly help define boundaries and not be so like, some people get on the other extreme of boundaries, and they're like, don't talk to me until I've had my coffee, or like, you know, like that's my boundary, and it's
coffee.
It's like, I don't know, man. I think you're just grumpy in the morning.
I think you're just not a morning person.
Yeah.
What are some lessons that you guys have learned? Like, if you can get concise about it, like, what are some big lessons you've learned from past experiences of hurt? Whether it's working through it, being in it, how you feel in it, like where you are now going through the different experiences that you have. What are some of those lessons?
I think as hard as it is to do it at times, letting my hurt draw me closer in my relationship to God than pushing me further from it. And that can look different, you know, depending on the scenario and the circumstance and who you are and how you're wired. But for me, it looked like just really going to God first in prayer and asking him and just having a conversation with God about where I'm at, but also reminding myself and letting the Spirit remind me that he's good, he's got a plan, he has purpose, and nothing that happens to me comes of surprise to God. Like, he just knows everything. And so I know it can be really hard to get to that place, and that a lot of times that's not our first reaction, is to go to God with it. But I've really found a lot of healing in that, because it really does just take the responsibility and the weights of carrying that off of my shoulders. And I feel like, okay, I've surrendered this to God. I really have. And I'm still hurt. That doesn't mean I'm not hurting anymore, but I don't feel like I'm carrying the weight of that hurt anymore.
It's good.
Yeah, I think that's great. Like learning the value and beauty of lament, of bringing your pains, your complaints, your anger and frustration to God is a beautiful thing. And like you mentioned earlier, Abel, about like sometimes moving towards vulnerability, it's baby steps, it's small steps. Well, you know, someone who will like always hear your hurt and honor it and hold it delicately and love you through it, the Lord who came and sat with you in it. Like he, like, I don't know if you guys have ever read the Psalms, but like if you read the Psalms, like the things that they say sometimes are so, like, we would blush if someone stood up in church on Sunday morning and said that to God. and we're like, oh goodness. But it's like there in our scripture, and God has space in relationship for saying, bring me your pain.
Yeah.
You know, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Like that's what I've learned through my experience of pain is the Lord comes close to me in those moments when people are drawing away, or when I draw into myself. There's no like depth I can go into myself where the Lord is not there and saying, "Hey, I'm here. Let me hold you." And so it's just a beautiful thing to discover. Our prayers don't have to be, you know, Lord, help me have a good day today. It could be like, you know, sometimes throughout my day, I'm like, Lord, why is this happening?
Yeah.
Like, why this situation? Or like, God, I am so frustrated right now. And the Lord is there and he hears it.
Yeah.
And he honors it.
Yeah.
And it almost becomes a place where I can process my hurt.
Yeah.
Or it does be like it, not almost, it does. It
Yeah.
becomes a place where I'm processing it. And I've just learned that the Lord is there and he will sit with you in your broken place and he will hold you through it and he will not shrink back from your anger, your frustration, your hurt or anything.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. And then I'll just say this other thing. The other thing I learned through my hurt and pain is that reconciliation is possible, but it's really, really difficult and hard.
Yeah.
To go back to that story I shared at the beginning with the tripod
Yeah.
and us like drifting apart from each other. What brought about healing in that situation is after that summer when we were leading worship together and we noticed all these things erupting, and that wedding was on the horizon, you know. I was like, I don't want to lose this friendship. And I talked to one of the other guys and it really just started. It didn't start with all three of us. It started with two of us. And I expressed how I had been feeling to him. And he's like, I've been feeling the same way. Can we like, and we stayed up to like 12 a.m. that night, just like talking through things. And then even after that conversation, we're like, we think we still have more processing to do. Like, let's plan a time where we can sit together and just talk through it. So what we did is like the next Sunday, we sat together in our church building in between services. No one was there. And we just sat in a room together, around, like a round table. And we just sat there and said, here's the way that you have hurt me. And that was such a hard thing to do, to look someone in the eyes who you've loved, who has hurt you, and say, here is how you have hurt me. It feels really awkward sometimes to say that. And then to sit and hear and say, please tell me how I have hurt you too. And then to have them say that. But that conversation, that discussion was so healing for us. And like you said, Lauren, I think earlier, like that conversation brought our relationship to such a deeper level of intimacy. Like that to this day, like we're still really close, even though he's still in California and I'm out here. And it was such a beautiful thing. And it was actually funny because at his wedding, I did stand up with him at his wedding.
Nice.
But at his wedding, our pastor, our youth pastor, was officiating, and he was sharing this story about my friends. And he said, here's how I like knew that the groom was has character and has integrity. Is there was one day I was praying before youth group, because it was before youth group that we had the conversation. So he's like, one day I was praying in before youth group. I was just on my face in the chapel, just praying. No one else was around. It was silent. And all of a sudden, in the next room over, I start hearing these voices, like talking to each other. And basically, long story short, our youth pastor was in the next room over praying for the youth group, and he like heard our whole conversation, and he was like, he just affirmed later on, like, what a beautiful moment. Like, it had blessed him to hear that
Wow.
vulnerability, that humility to say, I'm sorry that I have hurt you. Please forgive me. You have hurt me, but I forgive you. And so through that process, and later on we had another conversation. I had another conversation with the other friend. And so I just learned through that process that like reconciliation is possible. There's so many stories of reconciliation not happening, of relationships being shattered and broken, but that doesn't have to be how it ends. But it is really difficult. It takes humility, it takes vulnerability, like we've been saying.
Yeah.
And it all stems from the fact, like, the Lord has forgiven us of so many wrongdoings. And that empowers us and gives us the basis for looking to others and,
100%.
and forgiving them. And I can think of like 12 stories from scripture that reinforce that. You know?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, it was a beautiful thing, but a hard thing. So reconciliation is possible.
It's possible. Lauren?
I think for a long time I wanted to not experience hurt again. And then God's like, you're human. So you will always experience it if you like allow people to come close. So I think being okay and knowing too that like in the future it's worth it. Like those hard conversations, those tears, the frustration, the anger that comes with being really hurt sometimes, it's like worth it if you put the effort in and you put your heart into it. And similar to what you guys have already said, I think God is like so near in those moments. Like some of those precious, intimate moments come from drawing close to God and like having him draw near to you is like life-changing. You're just like, oh, okay, this is very painful. This is really hard, but also I'm really loved just as I am right now. Like really hurt or never wanting to go out and talk to another friend again. But like, this is worth it because God can heal and he's in it with me. So I think just being aware that God is there and that we're human, so there's no way to escape it. Like everyone will experience this, but it's how you respond to those moments that really shape who you are and your character and how you deal with the next hurt that comes. So, yeah.
I'm going through 1 Corinthians now in like personal quiet time, and I was reading 1 Corinthians 1 today, and that along with this conversation, right? Paul talks about this first kind of topic that he's talking about in this first chapter is division in the church, but then he goes into this section at the end of chapter 1. And the ESV Bible titles it "The Wisdom of God." And in verse 18, Paul writes, "The message of the cross is foolish to those who are headed for destruction. But we, right, believers, followers of Jesus, who are being saved, know it is the very power of God." And so I was just like thinking about that and thinking about this conversation and thinking of like the way the world does reconciliation is that they don't, right? Again, it goes back to the cancel culture and people. When you get hurt, you are almost like granted this power to cancel somebody and it's okay. But what we do as followers of Jesus, right, looks foolish to the world because what we're saying is, yes, even though you've hurt me, and I'm talking about very specific situations, right? I'm talking about situations that are not inherently toxic or abusive, but just like have wronged each other, right? Because I think those situations fall in a different category. I don't think you can all lump it together, but the ones where you know, there was betrayal or there was hurt, but again, it wasn't abusive. I'm talking into those specific situations, right? The message of the cross is, right, pursue reconciliation, pursue forgiveness, and even if it looks foolish to the world, you're doing this in Jesus's power, right? Because of the leveling that we all have at the cross, that we're all sinners and that we've all made mistakes and that we've all either betrayed someone's trust or hurt somebody. Because of that, right? And because you've been saved and reconciled to Christ first, right? Through Christ to God first, you can experience or at least shoot for that reconciliation in your human relationships as well. And so that, to me, that's like as I'm pursuing reconciliation in the future now, that's where like I'm rooting myself in, right? In that reality.
Josiah?
Yeah, I've learned that I can default to being jaded. And what that looks like for me is, and I just dealt with this recently. I was thinking about this thought and talking through this idea with somebody. I said, when I get hurt, I want to extend my hand without my heart. And I don't think that's the way that Christ has called us to be in relationships with people, especially within the church. I think God has called us to extend our hand and extend our heart, you know? And I think, like you were saying, Lauren, it opens you up to being hurt. And I think that's why I wrestle with it, is because I'm like, oh, I could just, even in ministry, if you're hurt by somebody in the church, like, oh, I'll just extend my gifting and my ability, and I'll just do what you want from me, but I'm not going to invest my emotions, my passion, my heart, my vulnerability. Like, I'm going to keep you at arm's distance and I'll fulfill what's required of me, but I'm not going to open up because I don't want to be hurt. And so, but I was just thinking that that's not, as I was just processing and talking through it with a friend, I realized that's not what I want for my life. I want to be someone that, like you were saying, Zach, that loves with everything and knows that part of loving with, you know, with all of your heart means that you're going to be hurt by people that are imperfect. And I think that's how Jesus loved. Jesus loved Judas in a perfect way and knew he was going to betray him. You know, Jesus loved Peter in a perfect way and knew Peter was going to, you know, say I didn't know him.
Yeah.
And like, if I knew someone was going to betray me, I'm not sure I'd love them with all my heart. Like, I'm not sure I'd really love them in a way. I think I'd try to guard myself. And yet that's I think the thing that we all run across. I think the other thing would be this, the other lesson I've learned that's been difficult is when we're talking about somebody that says something about you that's not truthful and there's hurt that comes with that. And a lot of times it's not to your face, it's you find out from somebody else. And you keep finding out. They just like this person, that person, like, dude, like, it's just so not true. I went through a situation like that and I felt like I need to defend myself. And I was calling and trying to defend, and that is exhausting. It's exhausting to try to tell the other side that's, you know, saying this is how I am and this is how I was handled and this is how it was dealt with when somebody else is saying something that's just flat out not true and they're saying it's not true, but then they're telling people, like, that's all so messy. And I realized that I was just getting so frustrated with it. I couldn't get over it. Every time that I found out something new, it reopened the wound. It reopened the wound. And I realized that I needed to just trust the Lord and say, God, you know how I've handled it. You know my heart, and I'm just going to trust it to you, right? Jesus said, I'm going to entrust myself to the one who judges justly. Like, I'm just going to trust it to you, because for me to be the one that's going to change everybody's opinion is exhausting to have to do that. And I know my heart, I know how it's handled, but I'm just going to trust you, Lord. And I think it allows you to start healing. And that's the final question I have for you guys as we close here is, how long does it usually take to get over being hurt by someone, and what factors can influence the healing timeline?
I think that's a case by case. Like, I think it changes depending on, you know, the extent of the relationship. Like, the deeper the relationship, the deeper it's probably going to hurt, right? And the longer it might take. But I wouldn't even say that's, because some people could heal quicker than other people, and that's okay. But I think giving yourself that space to heal and being okay with however long it takes you to heal, as long as you're taking steps to heal. I think it's one thing to not heal because you're just mulling over it and sitting in it, but I think you can grieve and lament well while taking steps to healing. Like, to me, like, there's just this picture of like a difference between passive healing and active healing. And in a passive healing, you're pitying yourself. You're like, man, oh, this sucks. Like, boo-hoo, you know, like, you're kind of just coming at yourself, right? And I think there's a time and a space for that at the beginning, but at some point, like, do you really want to stay stuck there? Like, do you really want to stay? I mean, like, to me, that would be like, I would feel like I just have a cloud over my head constantly, and like, I'm just in this down state. Like, I don't want to stay there. And so what are the steps that I'm going to take to pursue active healing and to pursue potentially maybe even reconciliation, you know, pursue forgiveness, right? Because you can't just come to it passively. You can't just forgive someone passively. Like, you have to make a decision to forgive this person, even if it doesn't come back to the same relationship that you had previously. You have to make the active decision to forgive, to heal. I think maybe some of us get caught up in the lie that we can just passively heal, and I can just sit here and be in my own thoughts and I'll heal eventually. I don't think it works like that.
What do you guys think? Factors that influence the healing timeline? Speed it up, slow it down.
I think the commitment level in the relationship, like, if you're in I'm not married, but if I imagine, and also, I mean, this applies to friendship too. But like if you're married and let's say husband hurts wife can't hold on to that hurt for so long without eventually affecting the relationship, right? Like you can't hold on to that for a week and just, oh, everything's fine. That causes a lot of pain and a lot of uncomfortability. And how do you where do you go from there, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think if the commitment level is like, we're in this to walk through hurt, and there, even in friendship, if there's that like really strong commitment to, you are in my inner circle, you are one of my closest friends, the timeline, at least for me personally, in those friendships, I feel is a lot shorter, because I know that there's that commitment of love. And if they make the effort to have that love be in action after they've hurt me, it kind of rewrites the story, and I know that commitment is still there. So I feel like is that making sense? Like if the commitment level is strong, I feel like it's a lot easier to, okay, you know what, I just need like an hour and then we'll come back, you know, and hug it out or something. Yeah. But if it's like someone that I'm like, for me, it takes a little bit longer. And that's where at both situations, drawing near to the Lord and being like, help, simply put, like help, period. It's just, it's hard. Like there's no easy way out of it. And I think it does take time, but, I think being open to forgiving. And then I think that's just so important, like following up action, like even if it's just a hug, like we just had a really hard conversation and you just told me how much I hurt you. It's like, okay, can we hug this out? So that there's a reassurance, like we still love each other. We're still committed.
Yeah.
There's still that like level of commitment there, I think is important. Or buying your friend a coffee, or I don't know, doing something that affirms like, no, I do love you, but I'm telling you this because I love you.
Yeah.
You know, we want to work this out. Like I'm committed.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so many factors. We could have a whole podcast series on this topic, you know, because it's so complex.
Yeah.
But definitely, like, the closer someone is to your heart, the deeper the wound can go. How long you are holding tight to it in your own self, like you were talking earlier, the deeper it'll cut in, the deeper the scars will go. If you decide to carry the pain by yourself and to deal with it on your own, like that's a sure way for that pain to like last a long time. We were meant to carry our pain together with others. And so one thing that can, I guess, speed up the process, it's, you know, speed isn't always what we're looking for.
Yeah.
I want to make that point too. Like some people feel guilty because they're still like feeling pain from something that happened a year ago or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, from their childhood. Right. But sometimes, like, I mean, sometimes things just take time to heal. Like your parents divorcing, that's going to be something that you have to continually wrestle with the rest of your life and into your marriage and the way you raise your kids. So being aware of that is one thing. Like speed isn't always the goal. But one thing that smooths the healing process over and keeps you in healing, like Abel said, those intentional steps, even if they're small, like that will happen better in community. And when you have people around you who are lifting you up when you fall, who are there to comfort you, to cry with you and mourn with you and things like that. So don't do it alone, because that's a sure way to keep it locked up tight. And when it's locked up tight, it festers, it grows, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it's a continual process. I like what you said also about forgiveness. Sometimes we think forgiveness is a one and done thing. But if someone has hurt you really deeply, you'll find yourself, oh, I forgive you, I've forgiven you. And then a couple of days later, something comes back up and you're just like, oh, I'm so angry at that person. And then you have to go through the process again. I've given this to the Lord. Like, I give it to you again. Like, help me to forgive this person, you know? So it's just that commitment and ultimately trusting the Lord. This is the last thing I'll say. It's a verse, and you reminded me of this, Abel, because you're reading 1 Corinthians 1. Yeah. Well, in 2 Corinthians 1, Paul is writing to that same messed up, divisive church that is just like hurting each other. Like,
here's a second letter for you.
Yeah.
You didn't get it.
Yeah.
And so Paul opens up the letter with this. He says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. For just as we share abundantly in the sufferings of Christ, right? We're talking about Christ has been through betrayal. Christ has been through suffering. He's the wounded healer. Like, just think about that phrase, wounded healer.
Suffering servant.
The suffering servant, yeah. For just as we share abundantly in the sufferings of Christ, so also our comfort abounds through Christ. If we are distressed, it is for your comfort and salvation. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which produces in you patient endurance of the same sufferings we suffer. And our hope for you is firm, because we know that just as you share in our sufferings, so also you share in our comfort. Like, God is the God of all comfort. And because of that, we can know that if it's still hurting, if it's still painful, and if we're still suffering, then it's not over yet. Like, comfort will come. But it comes through, like what Paul said, we suffered and can comfort you because we have suffered and experienced comfort. God brings comfort because God is the God of comfort. And so that is the sure way to bring about healing in whatever time it needs to come about, is if you come to the Lord, who is the God of all comfort, come to the people of God who carry that duty to bring healing to others. And unfortunately, that means pain comes through those people too, right? Because it's, church is imperfect, but God promises comfort will be the inevitable experience that we all have.
That's good. Lauren, you want to close us out praying for anybody that's struggling with hurting?
I feel like I closed last time.
Did you? Come on, that's a
Yeah.
tradition
Oh,
now.
wow.
Creating traditions.
Tipping saints or praying saints, I don't know.
Praying saints.
Yes. Lord, I just thank you for every person who just listened to this podcast. Thank you, God, that you're close to them. You're close to their hearts and what they carry right now, whether that be joy or pain, hurt, and trauma, whatever it is, Lord, you are near to them. And God, I want to ask that as they sign off or listen to another podcast or whatever, that you would just meet them right where they're at, that there would be the starting point or a continued process of healing that would happen in their hearts and also in their minds, that you would rewrite the story for them. They don't have to carry these things alone. They don't have to walk this burden alone, that you want to do it with them and that you have community for them that can walk with them, Lord, and teach them a new way to live, your way to live. And so I just pray that you would give them hope, give them a jump start to a new way of living and to healing and restoration, God, in their relationships. Thank you that you are the God of relationships, that you care about each individual in our hearts. And I just pray that you would give them peace and comfort in this moment. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen.